So, like in the beginning, I asked you about the use of anthropology.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about how anthropology can, and the knowledge that we get through the studies, it can help in the development projects that we get. So again, like there are, in particular Pakistan's case, there has been like so many developmental areas. We have been working on education. Climate is a priority as well, and many other areas as well. So, how this knowledge that we have on your area of expertise, which is anthropology, can help the development programs, and it can sort of like support the work that we do?
I think this is an excellent question because it's one that is very near to my heart. The reason I went to do a PhD, believe it or not, was to make a positive contribution to Pakistan. I owed so much to this country. I wanted to be part of helping it to overcome some of the challenges. And what I learned during this PhD is really the most important thing in development is figuring out what do people actually believe is good for them. I'm not saying they're always right, but you will not succeed in development if you are pushing an intervention on people that they don't believe is right, that they don't want. And that happens in development. We look in and we see, okay, they need greater wage opportunities. But if that's not what the community wants, if that's not what the people want, then you need to do an awful lot of background work before you get there. So, women's empowerment is one that's very near and dear to my heart. I would like to see much greater gender equality in this country. But I don't want to see people subjected to violence. And so I need to work with the community to understand why would their version of gender equality not necessarily match my version of gender equality? How do we bridge those? If I'm operating on behalf of a funder, right? If I'm taking money from USAID or UNDP, or I'm not taking the money, but the money is going to a community. Of course, they have their own version of what gender equality means, women's empowerment. Working with a community, if you can find a bridge there to somehow make the funders, help the funders understand they don't get to come in and make this like Berkeley, California, right? That's not happening. This is a community where women have their own idea of what empowerment means to them. Can we meet partway? Can we get to a point where women actually get the rights and obligations, or rights and empowerment that the community actually believes they should get? Because that's one of the problems, is people believe women should have rights that they're not getting now. Right? Across Pakistan, rural Punjab, I've seen lots of people believe women should have X rights, but they're not getting it. So can we at least start from there and say those rights that those communities believe, that's where we can start. We move from there. So I wrote a paper, this is 20 years ago, in which I was arguing that to encourage women's education, we need to have gender-specific education.
Yeah.
Teach women first aid, nutrition, basic hygiene, all of these things that will be recognized within the community as good for the household. Then they'd be willing to send their girls to school. Because the village I was in, no girls were going to school, right? Very, very few girls were going to school. And my goal was not to from one generation to the next, create the kind of gender empowerment that I would aspire to, but to get women into school. And I said that one generation down the line, those women will be literate, they'll be numerate, they will have higher aspirations for their own daughters. So we don't do it in one generation, we work with the communities. Today, in that village, almost every girl is being educated. Now, that's not thanks to me. I don't get any credit for that. But that has happened. And when I wrote that paper, this was 2004, 2005, I got roundly criticized by Pakistani feminists, people living in cities, saying to me, you're just an apologist for a bunch of patriarchal, sexist, misogynists. I was not trying to be an apologist for anyone, but I was trying to recognize that you can't drag people into change that they don't think is worthwhile. You couldn't drag me into that. If you had a very, very conservative funder who was coming into my community in the UK and saying, what you need here is to put your women in burqa and have them work from home, and that will make your society happier, I would resist that tooth and nail. If they came in and said, your women actually aren't safe, they're going out on the street and they are being raped and they are subjected to gender-based violence, I was like, yeah, you're right. So we need to work together to figure out how do we address the problems in ways that people genuinely believe are worthwhile. how do we do that without giving up our own values and principles? Because I do have ideas about an ideal society that I would like to see more widespread. But this is not my society. I may live in Pakistan, but I'm not Pakistani, and I don't get to tell Pakistanis how their future should be. So instead, what I think I should do is work with Pakistanis, work with the people in my program, all of my students in the arts and sciences program, work with the people, my friends in the village, to try and understand what is the ideal world for them, where do they want to go, translate that to the funders to help them understand how that may be a stepping stone in the direction that they also want to go, may also not be a stepping stone in that direction, but it's sort of that bridge between people who have a very ethnocentric version of how the world should be with people who have a very local, also ethnocentric, but it's a local version of how the world should be, and we can serve as that kind of interlocutor to communicate between it. Now, development is one of the areas where, you know, Pakistan has a huge development sector. Most development projects don't really achieve what they're after, right? If they did, we wouldn't have however many millions of people there are in Kachiabadi in Karachi. We wouldn't have urban poor. We wouldn't have hunger. We wouldn't have malnutrition. We wouldn't have really quite horrible stunting. All of these things are curable. They are fixable, but development doesn't seem to do it. Development doesn't build in its own obsolescence. Development, this is the Ferguson and Gupta's argument, is that development basically breeds a very nice lifestyle for people in the development sector, and it disincentivizes them from actually eradicating poverty and actually tackling the problems in a sustainable way. You think ideal development should be 5 to 10 years, and then you're out of a job. Then you move on to the next place. But that community, problem solved. So that's an area where I think anthropologists could actually make they are making a positive contribution. The problem is we often say things that funders don't want to hear, that actually local communities don't particularly want to hear, because we are going in, we recognize communities don't speak with one voice. The village that I lived in, there's lots of competing visions of how the world should be. And it's hard to reconcile when you've got one group saying this, one group saying that, and it's not just about different vested household interests, but also increasingly women are vocal in what they want, which may be at odds with what the men want. And so what an anthropologist can do is help everyone understand the range of opinion, the consensus that may exist, how widespread that consensus is. And that's something that we do. And I think that's something that we can do more effectively than most, because we are, right from the beginning, trying to suspend the external value judgment on a society and trying to understand society from within its own terms. Doesn't mean we always like it, but we try and understand it, and that makes it more possible for us to communicate that to others.
I also feel sometimes like the development programs that we have in the country, they're they try to sort of like replicate a lot of things that are happening in the other country, but to have knowledge about what's happening on the grassroots, that always helps to sort of like plan things forward. Tell me the best advice that you have ever heard.
Oh, best advice. I actually have a very, very good. When I was finished my undergraduate degree, and I was considering doing a PhD, an MA and a PhD, and I wasn't going to go into anthropology because my mother's an anthropologist, my stepfather's an anthropologist, my father's a folklorist, and I wasn't going to do it. And I was walking through the parking lot of the university where my mother and stepfather worked, and one of the senior professors there, he saw me and he called me over and he said, "Steve, why are you not doing anthropology in the graduate program?" And I said, my parents are all anthropologists. And he started poking me in the chest and he said, "Never let pride get in the way of what you really want to do." And it was, I went home, I slept on it, I woke up and I thought, he's right. The only thing that's stopping me from doing graduate studies in anthropology is because I didn't want to be a Nepo baby. And I just thought, well, I'll never be able to kind of be respected on my own terms. And okay, maybe that has happened. Maybe there are plenty of people who would say Steve wouldn't be where he is if his parents hadn't been anthropologists, if he wasn't a second generation anthropologist. But that was pride, because this job I love. This has been the most fulfilling occupation, career I could imagine. And if I had let pride stop me from that, I think that would have been a tragedy, really.
Yeah. So love what you do what you love.
Yes, exactly.